ಶ್ರೀ ಗುರುಭ್ಯೋ ನಮಃ. ವಿದ್ಯಾಪೀಠ ವಿಧಾತಾರಂ ವಿದ್ಯಾವಾರಿಧಿ ಚಂದಿರಂ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ವತ್ಸಲಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಹಾಮಹಿಮ ಸದ್ಗುರುಂ. ಶ್ರೀ ಗುರುಭ್ಯೋ ನಮಃ. In the previous part, we have learnt how a small child Vasudeva demonstrated very great ideals in life. He showed us how one should relieve one's parents, their burden and difficulties which arrive in various forms. He discharged his father's obligation by repaying the debt incurred by him. In another incident, the neighbor Mudillaya, who gifted a milch cow, gained moksha pradajnana because he gifted the cow to the holy couple Madhwacharya and Vedavati Devi. For what? To satisfy the hunger of the holiest person, who Madhwacharya itself. From this, what can we understand? Charity, when it is done to worthy persons, it gives us fruitful and precious results. In another incident, we get to know there is nothing more powerful than the mercy of Lord. It was only because of the Lord's mercy upon the entire crew members of Madhwacharya's family, because it was only due to the child Vasudeva their entire family was spared from the affliction of death caused by the demons in their midnight journey from Udupi to Pajaka. From all these, we can understand how Vasudeva, he depicted very great ideals in life which touches the hearts of pious and religious people. Narayana Panditacharya also explains these incidents in a very proper manner. This third sarga, it begins with one of the incident of Vasudeva in a very interesting manner. Once it so happened, Madhwacharya Bhatta and Vedavati Devi along with their child Vasudeva, they had to attend a family function of a relative in the nearby place Nidiyuru. It was a marriage function. Amongst all these noisy festivities and cultural programs being taken place, including the influx and efflux of the kith and kin, Vasudeva, he was least interested in all these materialistic pleasures. He was least interested in the family function. It was clearly understood that Vasudeva's birth was destined to take the holy order of sannyas ashrama. Hence, he was neither interested in this materialistic pleasures. When Vasudeva was sure he was unnoticed by everyone, he immediately moved away and straightly moved to Udupi. After some time, when parents realized their kid was missing, their anxiety grew lifeless. They were completely dumbstruck for a while. They didn't know what to do. The news spread like a fire in the entire city, entire village, from mouth to mouth, that the charming kid Vasudeva of the Pajaka Kshetra was missing. A vigorous search began everywhere, on the streets, on the roads, on the wayside roads, in all the houses, everywhere. This search reminds us of the song, Kusina Kandira, Mukhya Pranana Kandira. When the vigorous search was going on, finally at last they got a clue from a passerby that he saw a small kid moving towards Udupi. Hoping the most positively, the poor father Madhwacharya Bhatta, he immediately rushed to Udupi to the temple of Lord Ananteshwara. His joy grew immeasurably because he found his kid prostrating himself completely on the feet of Lord Ananteshwara. At the same time, he was completely fear-ridden because as to who accompanied him all the way from the place where the marriage was taking place to Udupi. Because the distance from the place Nidiyuru to Udupi, it was almost 2 yojanas. According to our present day calculations, it accounts up to 7 kilometers. Madhwacharya Bhatta was completely fear-ridden. He quietly, he silently, he inquired his child, who accompanied him all the way. The child Vasudeva, with complete innocence, he simply replied, the Lord himself accompanied him all the way. Madhwacharya Bhatta was completely speechless, but his conviction was that the Lord Sri Hari itself, in the disguise of a man, accompanied him, because he was the one who protected Vasudeva all the way. His heart completely flowed in gratitude towards the Lord Ananteshwara because he returned back his bestowed son to him. Aksharabhyasa. Introducing the child to the alphabet. This is one of the common traditions in any cultured family. It is one of the important traditions also. This tradition of Vasudeva, it happened quite interestingly. On an auspicious day, Father Madhwacharya Bhatta, he initiated his son Vasudeva to write the letters of Sanskrit language. That time Sanskrit language was predominant. Very enthusiastically, his father explained him the importance of alphabets and made him write the alphabets. Vasudeva also wrote it very neatly, very clearly and accurately. His accent was also very accurate on the very first day itself. Vasudeva's response was splendidly wonderful also. Looking at all this, the entire family was amazed. The next day, when Madhwacharya Bhatta made him rewrite the letters which were taught the previous day, the boy simply got bored. He questioned his father why was he insisting him to write the same letters again and again because he had already learned them. This made Madhwacharya Bhatta completely speechless. From then itself, Madhwacharya Bhatta understood his son was Ekasantagrahi. He decided to teach him in a very secluded place, away from all the lookers, in order to avoid any possible bad eye, what we consider as drishti dosha today. Vasudeva, even as a very small boy, he depicted a great thing. He gave a hidden hint to the world through an interesting incident that happened in the village Neyampally. He gave a hint to the world that his main reason of birth on this earth was Jnanakarya, was to establish our Madhva philosophy, was to establish our Dvaita Siddhanta and preach our philosophy to one and all. It so happened that once Vedavati Devi along with Vasudeva had to attend a function of a close relative in a village Neyampally. There a Puranik was giving discourse and addressing the audience, which included even Vedavati Devi and Vasudeva also. Vasudeva was a very small kid, a 3 to 4 year old kid. He was sitting on the laps of his mother and he was also completely hearing the discourse with very keen interest. At one stage, Vasudeva felt completely uneasy. Without knowing his mental agitation, Vedavati Devi was simply warning him to keep his mouth shut, warning him to keep quiet. But Vasudeva couldn't control anymore because the discourse was proceeding in an erroneous direction which was against our philosophy. He had to immediately stop it. So, quietly, he stood up in the audience and he explained his agitation. Suddenly, the entire audience, they turned towards the tiny kid. The Puranic's interpretation was wrong. This was the announcement made by Vasudeva. Instantaneously, the entire audience turned towards the tiny interpreter who Who is this tiny kid? They could neither ignore the boy nor allow the Puranic to continue further, because the point raised by Vasudeva seemed totally significant to everyone. Suddenly, not knowing what to do, one of the member in the audience, he insisted Vasudeva himself to give the correct interpretation. Vasudeva neither feared completely, to the utter surprise and astonishment of the entire audience. He simply stood up. In his sweet child language, he gave the correct interpretations of the discourses. The Puranic, he shook his head in shame. He gave a very convincing and a very neat universal approval of the discourse given by the Puranic. He won the admiration from the entire audience. Vedavati, who was feared, shed tears of joy. After returning home, Vasudeva explained the entire incident to his father and inquired as to who was correct, the Puranic or he himself. Madhwacharya Bhatta, who was also well versed in all the discourses, he understood everything, and he simply replied and patted on the shoulders of his child and said his child was only correct. Immediately, Madhwacharya's heart went to Lord Ananteshwara, because he was the secret reason for his child's brilliant wisdom and his child shining in the entire audience today. Not just the Puranic, Vasudeva did not spare even his father also. Once his father was giving a discourse. He was addressing the audience. He was explaining each and every meaning, meaning of each and every word in a particular shloka. There, knowingly or unknowingly, he left to explain the meaning of a small word, likucha. Vasudeva politely interrupted his father and asked him for the meaning of word likucha again. His father, he couldn't explain it properly. But that time Vasudeva, he explained it very clearly by explaining it to be the meaning of a particular jackfruit tree. Vasudeva, who was completely attentive, and his reply was very accurate and was admired by all. From the above two incidents, we can clearly understand Vasudeva's command over the subjects. He had a very clear, incisive knowledge. He never would compromise on the facts and data. The same trait we can find even in all the scriptures today, because he explains all the facts and data without leaving anything in the between. He never left any data, any facts unexplained. We can find the same trait when he explains brilliantly the threefold meanings of Vedas, Mahabharata, and many other scriptures. At the same time, the other schools of thought left behind many meanings, considering it to be meaningless or repetitive or meant for lower persons. They tend to take it partially because it suits their tenets, it suits their philosophy. This sarga mainly explains Vasudeva's devotion in God, his extraordinary talents in learning, his thoroughness in understanding everything in depth, his great strength and sportsmanship. He was an extraordinary personality with great talents, not yet fully revealed, but he was extremely human and compassionate towards everyone. Vasudeva was an ocean of intellect. Let not the evil eyes and someone who is envious of his great strength, of his great bright, do not cause any harm to him. His father Madhwacharya Bhatta, thinking so, decided to do Upanayana, the sacred thread ceremony, to his son. In the next part, let us know the function of Vasudeva's sacred thread ceremony, Vasudeva's Upanayana, and his Gurukula Vasa, his studies in the Gurukula, in the next part. Thank you. ಶ್ರೀಕೃಷ್ಣ ಅರ್ಪಣಮಸ್ತು.